Leonie and her mother were among around 1.4 million women who were raped while fleeing East Prussia or Silesia, often more than once. Nazi propaganda about the Red Menace meant fear of the Soviet soldiers was especially great.
No one expected captured Nazi German women to turn pale from something as simple as soap. What should have been cleansing became a source of fear, leaving scars far deeper than the camp fences. Could this reaction be as a result of memories of Nazi rumors they've heard? Join us as we unveil the details of how these women turned pale when they showered with soap in America. Shock behind the soap. The story of German women held as prisoners of conflict in America carries one shocking moment that never left their memory. When they were first told to shower, many froze in fear. The sight of soap and running water turned their faces pale. It was not because of the soap itself, but because of what it reminded them of. In conflict zone Germany, whispers had spread about lifeless camps, where showers did not clean people but led to their end. For women suddenly captured and brought across the ocean, the thought of stepping under a spray of water was terrifying. The guards at the camp only wanted the prisoners to stay clean, but the women did not see it that way. To them, the soap seemed dangerous, and the tiled rooms looked too much like the stories they had heard. Their reaction showed how deeply fear had been planted in them. Even though they were far from the reach of the Nazi regime, the shadow of that world still shaped every thought. A simple act, like bathing, brought back dread that could not easily be pushed aside. The fear also revealed another truth. These women had no idea what to expect in America. Rumors in Germany had painted American soldiers as brutal and cruel. Families were told that if captured, their sons and daughters would be mistreated, starved, or left to pass on. So when these women ended up in U.S. camps, they were prepared for the worst. The soap and shower shock was the first sign that reality did not match the warnings they had grown up with. Life inside the camp proved very different from what they imagined. Hygiene was taken seriously. Every prisoner was given soap, towels, and access to washrooms. The barracks were kept neat, and the rules were clear. Prisoners had to bathe regularly, change into clean uniforms, and keep their sleeping spaces tidy. For women who had come from conflict German towns where even water was scarce, this strict order felt both strange and overwhelming. The smell of fresh soap became part of their new routine, whether they liked it or not. Food was another surprise. Instead of starvation, they found plates with bread, meat, and vegetables. Meals were not lavish, but compared to the hunger back in Germany, it was plenty. Some women even gained weight, which they never expected while in captivity. The act of eating well after years of rationing only made the memory of their earlier fear of the showers more striking. America, the enemy, had become a place where they were cleaner and better fed than at home. The living quarters also left an impression. Each prisoner was given a bunk bed with blankets and a set of clothing. The barracks were simple but solid, offering warmth and safety that many had not known in years. In Germany, nights had been spent in basements, listening to the roar of planes and the crash of armor. In America, nights were spent in silence, with the only sounds being guards making their rounds. The contrast between destruction at home and order in the camp could not have been sharper. But comfort did not erase the cultural shock. For German women, the biggest struggle was trust. How could people raised as enemies suddenly hand them soap, clean clothes, and hot food? Every act of kindness was mixed with suspicion. Some feared it was a trick, while others could not stop thinking about the lies they had believed. That first shower, the one that left them pale, kept returning in their minds as a symbol of how confusing captivity would be. As weeks went on, some of the women slowly adjusted. The fear of showers faded, though it never completely disappeared. Bathing became part of the rhythm of life in the camp. They began to see that survival meant learning the rules and fitting into routines. For many, the showers became not just a place of fear, but also the first step toward understanding that their time in America would not be what they had imagined back in Germany. Aside from all these, The soap and shower shock carried a meaning larger than hygiene. It was the first moment where the women saw their old world collide with the new. They carried memories of rumors, fear, and conflict, and suddenly they were faced with order, food, and safety in the hands of the enemy. That strange clash made every step in the camp harder to understand. The women were left in a space between fear and relief, never sure which feeling to hold on to. If the showers left them shaken, what awaited them next in the daily life of captivity was an even more confusing mix of strict rules and unexpected freedoms. Days of discipline and strange freedoms. Life inside the American camps followed a flow that soon became familiar to the German women prisoners of conflict. Each day began early with roll calls. Guards walked through the barracks, counting every prisoner and checking the sleeping areas. The women stood in line, sleepy but obedient, knowing that attendance was not optional. Though strict, these roll calls were nothing like the loud drills they had expected from enemy soldiers. Instead of shouts or beatings, there was order and routine. The discipline was firm, but it did not carry the cruelty they had been warned about back in Germany. After roll call, the women were given their assignments. Every prisoner had work to do. Some washed laundry, scrubbing uniforms, and hanging them to dry in neat rows. Others were placed in kitchens, where they prepared food not only for prisoners, but also sometimes for guards. Many were tasked with sewing or mending clothing. A few worked outside, helping with farm tasks or maintaining campgrounds. These jobs were not charming, but they gave structure to long days of confinement. For women who had grown up in a Germany where duty and order were drilled into daily life, the work reminded them of home, though without the terror of air raids overhead. What surprised many was the space for freedom hidden within the fences. Within the limits of the camp, women could often move around without heavy supervision. They could talk, walk in groups, or sit in corners sharing quiet conversations. Some camps even offered classes. A few women learned basic English words. Others tried their hands at arithmetic or crafts. The chance to study while in captivity felt almost unreal. They had left Germany prepared for suffering, yet here they were learning skills for a future they had not imagined. Letters were another lifeline. Though every word was censored by American officials, women were allowed to write home. They filled pages with messages to mothers, fathers, and children left behind. Many letters carried hope, but behind the polite lines was a river of fear. Fear for families still living under armors, fear of never returning home, fear of being forgotten. Writing became a release, even if they did not know whether their letters would ever truly reach loved ones. To fill hours that work and study did not cover, prisoners turned to small hobbies. Some sang German folk songs softly in the barracks. Others made simple carvings, stitched patterns, or painted with whatever supplies they could find. These acts were not only entertainment, but also a way to cling to identity. Through song, art, poetry, and craft, the women tried to remember who they were before the conflict carried them across the ocean. Yet, no amount of work or music could erase the emotional weight. Homesickness sat heavy on their shoulders. Many thought daily of families struggling through rationing and conflicts in Germany. Shame also haunted them. In their culture, being captured was often seen as dishonorable. Some women carried guilt for surviving when others they loved were still in danger. Safety in the American camps felt almost like betrayal to the ones left behind. Some still clung fiercely to Nazi beliefs, insisting that Germany would win and that loyalty must remain unshaken. The way American guards handled the prisoners added another layer of confusion. To the women's surprise, many guards treated them with a level of respect. Orders were strict, but there was no daily mistreatment or cruelty. Guards enforced rules, but often without malice. Some even showed kindness, offering extra blankets in the cold or answering simple questions with patience. For women raised on stories that Americans were monsters, this behavior was difficult to understand. Were the guards simply pretending, or had they been lied to all along? The mixture of discipline and unexpected freedom left the women constantly uncertain. They could not deny that life in the camps was safer than in conflict Germany, yet they could not fully trust it either. Every letter home, every class attended, every song sung carried this tension. Captivity in America was neither hell nor heaven. It was a place of contradictions, where fear and relief lived side by side. Yet even as they settled into this strange balance of order and freedom, whispers of betrayal, suspicion, and hidden loyalty began to stir behind the barbed wire. Whispers behind the barbed wire. As weeks turned into months, life inside the camps was no longer just about work, food, and routines. A new challenge grew among the German women prisoners of division.
Nazi propaganda about the Red Menace meant fear of the Soviet soldiers was especially great.
At first, they had shared the same fears and the same shock over soap, showers, and strange American kindness. But slowly, cracks began to show. Some women still clung fiercely to the Nazi cause. They repeated the slogans they had been taught, swore loyalty to Hitler, and treated any sign of doubt as betrayal. The split between loyalists and doubters deepened with every passing day. With division came suspicion. Whispers moved through the barracks at night. Who could be trusted? Who was listening too closely? Rumors spread that some prisoners reported to the guards. The women wondered if there were informants among them, passing along names of those who questioned Nazi rule. Even small conversations became risky. A careless word could bring punishment, not just from guards, but from fellow prisoners still loyal to Germany's cause. The barbed wire kept the women trapped inside, but the web of mistrust built invisible walls between them as well. The Americans had rules for discipline, and the women quickly learned the cost of breaking them. A prisoner caught defying orders might be denied letters home, placed on harder labor, or kept in isolation. In some cases, privileges like music, crafts, or movement around the camp were taken away. None of these punishments were brutal compared to what they had feared, yet they were harsh reminders that freedom was still out of reach. Every punishment also stirred new resentment, making the atmosphere inside the barracks heavier. Though most prisoners followed rules to avoid trouble, moments of open defiance still happened. Some women refused to work, challenging guards with cold silence. Others whispered propaganda, telling fellow prisoners that Germany would soon rise again and that surrender was shameful. On rare occasions, women argued openly with American officers, refusing to show respect. These bursts of disrespect rarely lasted long, but they showed that beneath the surface, anger and pride still burned. Beyond discipline, another weight pressed on them: loneliness. The ocean between America and Germany was more than water. It was a wall of distance that made escape impossible and return uncertain. In Europe, some prisoners dreamed of slipping away to friendly villages.
The city with the largest Jewish population in Europe, the situation became untenable within a few months.
Or melting into forests. But in America, where could they go? Even if they escaped the camp fences, they were surrounded by an entire continent of strangers speaking a foreign language. The loneliness of being so far from home drained their strength, leaving many restless at night and numb in the morning. Yet whispers of escape still drifted through the barracks. Women compared stories they had heard about daring breakouts in Europe, men digging tunnels, stealing uniforms, or cutting wires under cover of darkness. These tales gave momentary sparks of hope, but in truth, everyone knew the chances were almost none. America was too far, too vast, and too watchful. Still, the very act of dreaming about freedom was a quiet rebellion. On the other side of the wire, the Americans were not blind to the tensions inside. Guards worried that hardened Nazis among the women could stir unrest, perhaps even outburst. Some camps watched closely for signs of plotting, keeping notes on who clung to ideology and who softened. Suspicion ran both ways. The women feared betrayal from within, and the Americans feared trouble from the loyalists among them. This constant watchfulness only made the atmosphere more tense. For some women, faith became a refuge. They prayed in corners of the barracks, whispered hymns under their breath, or worn copies of the Bible. Prayer gave them strength when despair grew too heavy. Others, however, rejected religion. For them, captivity proved that faith had no power. This difference created another layer of division, sometimes leading to sharp words or cold silence between prisoners. In an environment already split by politics, even faith became a battlefield. The strain of captivity showed in quieter ways, too. Guards sometimes noticed women sitting in silence for hours, staring at nothing. At night, the sound of crying slipped through the barracks. Some women lost interest in food, while others withdrew into themselves, speaking less each day. Depression crept through the camp like a shadow, unseen but always present. The soap and showers that had once frightened them no longer seemed dangerous, but the fear inside their minds was harder to wash away. Every day became a test of survival, not just of body, but of spirit. The women carried memories of home, fear of betrayal, shame of capture, and uncertainty about the future. Behind the barbed wire, conflict did not roar with armor and bullets, but it lived on in whispers, suspicions, and broken trust. But just when the women thought camp life had settled into a slow grind of rules and suspicion, events beyond the fences would shake their world even more. The constant rules reminded them that their freedom was gone, and that their lives belonged to the system now. This discipline added another layer of fear to their daily routines, a fear that showed itself most clearly when they walked pale-faced into the showers. Work remained a central part of their days, but not all of it happened inside the camp fences. In some regions, women were marched out under supervision to help on farms, in canning factories, or at textile sites.
Fruit and vegetable canning is one of our industries. Nowadays, it's carried on mostly by the women of the town.
These outings created mixed feelings. On the one hand, stepping outside gave them a glimpse of normal life, fields and towns. On the other hand, the presence of armed guards reminded them that they were not free workers but prisoners. Encounters with Americans during these jobs could be tense, though sometimes unexpected kindness replaced suspicion. Still, even while harvesting crops or sewing fabric, the women carried the memory of soap and showers as proof of how deeply fear shaped their captivity. Cultural shock added another challenge. American women lived differently from what the prisoners had known in Germany. They walked freely, spoke openly, and dressed without the rigid formality of Nazi society. Some even drove cars or worked in roles traditionally closed to German women. Watching them stirred confusion among the POWs. A few admired the independence, while others clung to the old belief that such freedom was improper. The difference unsettled them, reminding them of how far away from home they truly were. The soap that drained the color from their faces was not the only thing that left them shaken. So did the discovery of an entirely different world of womanhood. These cultural differences showed themselves in small details too. The women noticed how American families dined together with a variety of food and casual manners. Unlike the rationed and formal meals back home, they observed how daughters spoke more freely with fathers and how wives could challenge husbands without fear. To women raised under a strict system of control, this looseness appeared strange, even reckless. Some POWs whispered that such freedom explained why America had grown powerful, while others rejected the thought. Each sight of independence outside camp walls forced them to reflect on the lives they had lost to conflict. Medical care in the camps also shocked the prisoners. In Germany, conflict shortages meant doctors were scarce, and medicine even scarcer. But in America, camp clinics treated illnesses, vaccinated against disease, and handed out bandages or ointments when needed. Even dental care was provided in some locations. The women could hardly believe they were being treated, while their own people at home lacked such resources. This care confused them. How could the enemy heal them when they had expected only cruelty? Yet each visit to the infirmary reminded them that not all of what they had been told in Germany was true. The medical staff sometimes spoke to them kindly, asking about aches, or offering advice on hygiene. These moments unsettled the women even more than strict discipline. They had been taught to hate and expect hatred in return, but a gentle tone or a reassuring smile left them disoriented. The women also struggled with their sense of identity. In Germany, they had been praised for supporting the conflict, raising children, working in factories, or encouraging soldiers. Now they were reduced to numbers, lined up and counted. Their role as strong German women vanished the moment they stepped inside the barbed wire. The pale look they wore during showers spoke to this collapse of identity. No longer powerful or admired, they were simply captives, forced to accept a life controlled by others. There were, however, moments of small privileges that softened captivity. Camps sometimes organized music hours, where women could sing together or play simple instruments. Crafting circles allowed them to sew, knit, or carve objects from scraps. Books appeared in camp libraries, offering a way to escape through stories. These privileges did not erase the fear of showers or the weight of imprisonment, but they gave the women short breaks from constant anxiety. A song sung among friends could briefly chase away the ghost of terror, even if only for a few minutes. Contact with civilians during outside work assignments often left lasting impressions. Some Americans kept their distance, regarding the women as dangerous enemies. Others, especially in rural areas, were curious or even sympathetic. A farmer might offer a small piece of fruit, or a housewife might smile when the prisoners passed by. These gestures unsettled the women, who had been told Americans would treat them like animals. Some encounters went deeper. A few civilians attempted to speak broken German, asking where the women came from or whether they had families. Even brief exchanges made a lasting impression. For women starved of news and connection, a simple question about home felt powerful. Yet, they remained cautious. Trusting an American too much could cause conflict with fellow prisoners still loyal to Nazi beliefs. These shifts, however, caused sharp divides among the prisoners. Some women insisted that kindness was only a trick, that America was still the enemy. Others slowly softened, admitting that what they saw with their own eyes did not match the lessons drilled into them back home. Arguments broke out in barracks, sometimes bitter and full of accusation. A pale face in the showers could mean terror for one woman, but for another, it might mean shame at realizing she had been misled. The camp became a place where loyalty and doubt clashed daily. Yet even with new experiences and small comforts, emotional strain never left them. Anxiety lived in their bodies, waiting to be triggered by the simplest things. A whistle from a guard, the clang of metal doors, or the handover of soap could bring back waves of fear. The pale faces in the showers stood for much more than a single moment. They represented the fragile line between survival and despair. The story of these women shows how captivity reshaped every part of their lives. They entered the camps carrying the weight of lies, and each day tested whether they would cling to those lies or allow reality to change them. Soap and showers revealed the depth of their fears, but daily life revealed the possibility of transformation. And yet, this brings us to the most difficult chapters which they were to face ahead. When release finally came and the women returned to Germany, they would face not only ruined cities, but also the judgment of their own people. What awaited them back home was a challenge even greater than the pale fear of showers in America. The Great Release. The end of captivity brought no single emotion. For many German women, release from the American prisoner camps felt like a door opening and closing at the same time. On one side stood relief, freedom, and the promise of going home. On the other side waited uncertainty, hunger, and the shadows of what had been lost. Their story after the barbed wire was cut is just as heavy as the one lived inside it. The first step of freedom was often a slow process. Camps did not simply unlock their gates overnight. American officers released women in stages, carefully recording names and ensuring there was order. Some women walked out carrying a few belongings, others with only the clothes they had worn for months. The first breath of air beyond the fences was both sweet and strange. They had longed for it, yet after so much routine and fear, it felt almost unreal. When trains or trucks carried them back to Germany, the real shock began. The homeland they returned to did not resemble the one they remembered. Entire cities had been flattened by armors. Streets were lined with shouts. Families searched among ruins for anything useful. Food was scarce, houses destroyed, and winter made survival even harder. Many women whispered that the camps, harsh as they had been, at least gave them shelter and rations. Now they had to struggle all over again. The welcome they received was rarely warm. Neighbors and officials often looked at former prisoners with suspicion. They asked questions in hushed tones. Had these women worked for the enemy? Had they been weak and allowed themselves to be changed by life in America? For many, being a female prisoner carried extra stigma, as if their honor had been touched simply by living under foreign control. Silence became their shield. They learned to keep their stories quiet, blending back into the ruins without drawing attention. Family reunions were both joyous and heartbreaking. Some women were lucky to find their parents alive, waiting with open arms despite hardship. Others returned to homes where fathers, husbands, or brothers were missing, never to come back from the front. Children who had grown during the years of conflicts sometimes struggled to recognize their mothers. In many homes, the joy of reunion was mixed with tears for those who would never return. The scars of captivity did not fade with release. The memory of American showers remained carved deep in their minds. Many women could never again step under falling water without trembling. Some avoided bathing alone, while others poured water from basins to feel safer. The pale faces seen in those early camp showers were not forgotten. Soap, once ordinary, now carried layers of dread and relief. The very smell of it could pull them back to that moment of fear. Because of these painful memories, most women spoke little about their time behind barbed wire. In gatherings or family circles, they avoided details. If asked, they offered short answers, often changing the subject. Their silence was both protection and burden. They feared judgment from neighbors, and at the same time, they wanted to keep their children safe from the weight of such memories. Only in old age did some share fragments, usually when younger relatives pressed them with questions. Yet, silence did not mean nothing was carried home. Many women brought back subtle lessons from their years in America. They had seen orderly lines, fair treatment in rations, and at times, a sense of dignity they had not expected from an enemy. They noticed hygiene routines, medical care, and a different way of running daily life. Even if they never spoke of it openly, some wove these lessons into their homes. They taught their children to value cleanliness, fairness, and the small freedoms of choice. For others, captivity shaped beliefs in different ways. Some lost faith in the propaganda they had once been taught. They could not forget how Nazi officers had described Americans as brutal and heartless, only to meet guards who, while strict, still followed rules and did not behave as monsters. This contrast opened cracks in their old loyalties. But not every woman felt this shift. Some returned bitter, convinced they had been victims of injustice. They carried resentment, unwilling to see any good in their captors. The camp years remained, for them, only a wound. The impact did not stop with their generation. In later years, children and grandchildren would hear small parts of these stories. Sometimes it came as a casual remark, other times as a whispered memory after decades of silence. Younger relatives learned that even ordinary objects like soap or showers had once carried terror. In this way, the trauma reached across time, shaping how families understood both conflict and peace. In the end, the legacy of these women's captivity was larger than the fences that once surrounded them. A single bar of soap became a symbol of survival and fear. Pale faces in American showers were not just camp memories, they were signs of a wound that never healed completely. For some, that bar of soap meant life, proof that they had endured. For others, it meant the closeness of their passing, a reminder of how fragile safety could be. Decades later, long after the conflict had ended and cities had been rebuilt, these women could still feel the weight of those days. They could smile at grandchildren, cook meals, or walk in peaceful streets, but the past remained close. A scent, a sound, a simple routine could bring back what they had tried so hard to bury. Their story is not only about captivity, but about how memory clings to the simplest things. The showers of America, the pale faces, and the bar of soap became a haunting image they carried for life. Even after freedom, the memory of soap and showers in American camps never left these women. Their pale faces carried silent stories of fear, survival, and resilience. What began as captivity became a lifelong shadow, showing how even the smallest details of conflict can leave marks that echo through generations. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.